The world doesn't revolve around you, Gar. Hello there, and welcome to Magic by Design. We're getting existential this week with a review of Pixar's 23rd animated feature Soul, first released in December 2020. But before we definitively discover the meaning of life, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Ken, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host / brother. He's Garrett. Gar, how are you?
Why am I being attacked to open the podcast, Ken?
I don't know. It's a line from the movie. Your name is Gar. You're the person that's in front of me, so...
So you're just like, let's call him stupid. He's like, you're not Mr. World. You're not Mr. Universe. Not Arnie. If I were Arnie, would you be able to say the world does revolve around me because he was Mr. Universe?
I suppose.
So that means the world does, in fact, statistically revolve around him. Also, he's been in many movies.
Not in this movie, though.
No, he should be, though.
Why not?
Because he can help people find their spark. I'm surprised they didn't have a cameo from that Netflix lady. Spark Joy lady?
Marie Kondo.
Yeah.
She's more into cleaning and tidying, isn't she?
If you just throw out all these belongings, you will be happy and be able to live. I don't know what she sounds like. I've never watched the show.
Well, she's Japanese, so she doesn't often speak English. She has an
So she
interpreter.
does not speak with a British accent. I'm a British lady.
No, but in fairness, if you've never seen the show, most of these people are British.
She's really assuming a lot on the name Marie Kondo. Does she live in a condo? A condominium?
I don't know.
Is that where her name came from? She lived in this condominium, and she was like, God, it's very cramped. I'm not very happy. And then she threw a few things out and it's like, I am happy. Then she looked at something and didn't throw it out because it sparked joy inside of her. And that's where she got her name and that's where it all came from. This is the deep lore of Marie Kondo.
Imagine being called after where you live. We'd be called Ken and Gar Bungalow. Not a bad name, actually. It's quite fun to say.
Yeah, bungalow. It feels good in the mouth, bungalow, doesn't it?
It does.
It's better than like Ken and Gar semi-detached house.
Yeah.
Or Ken and Gar granny flat.
Or bed sit.
These are considerably worse names.
Gar, so I do remember watching this on Christmas Day last year. It was a wonderful way to cap off a day of eating and merriment. It hasn't been explicitly mentioned, but I view this as a spiritual sequel to Inside Out.
Well, it does have like the colour scheme of Inside Out, particularly the afterlife stuff, or before life, I suppose.
The great before, yeah.
Because there is afterlife there too. So it's both. Don't you criticize me, movie.
Well, they never show the afterlife, really, do they?
They do. They show the giant bridge going to death.
Yeah, but they don't show what it's like after that.
But they do. That's the great beyond. And that's where you learn. But yeah, it shares at least an art style.
I think it shares a philosophy and, it looks at similar themes as well, though.
It also shares a director, so that's probably why.
Indeed, this is directed by Pete Docter, who conceived the idea in early 2016 when pondering the origins of human personalities and the idea of determinism. Are you aware what determinism is, Gar?
That you have...
I nearly messed up the pronunciation there, but you got what I meant.
I'm determined to power through with this podcast. That you have, like, control over your own destiny, isn't it?
I think it's the opposite. I think it's like set out for you.
Oh, because your path is predetermined. Fate is simply guiding you where it wants to, and you have no free will and no choice and no direction in that.
Yeah, and your personality and your drive in life is predetermined. In his first meeting with co-writers Mike Jones and Kemp Powers, what a name!
Kemp Powers?
Yeah, Kemp Powers.
Oh, Kemp.
Yes.
Kemp is surely short for something.
Well, I don't know, that's the name I have here.
The Wikipedia still just says Kemp.
Docter pitched an idea set in a place beyond space and time where souls are given their personalities.
Good name, Kemp. Yes. You know what the biggest problem with this movie is?
Getting straight into it, Gar.
Yeah, and it's once again not a problem with the movie. It's that The Good Place exists.
True, and it was out around the same time as well.
Well, it was out much before. Like, The Good Place was over by the time this movie came out.
Actually, yeah, it ended the same year this came out. Yeah.
So, if this film came out before The Good Place, I would have been like, oh, geez, this is such a creative, like, rendering of the before life. But because it came out after The Good Place, and one might suggest maybe poached a couple ideas from The Good Place in terms of how it portrayed that before life. You're like, oh, it's The Good Life.
Does The Good Place...
A Good Place, even.
Does it portray that, though?
Yeah.
It portrays the afterlife, I thought.
Yeah, but it's still the same idea. It's still like, here's the bureaucratic idea behind life. Like when they're introducing them to like, here, here's all this stuff, and this is where the things come from, and this is bloody bloody blah. It's basically, it might as well be Ted Danson.
I guess so. Yeah, I see what you mean.
There's a lot of that stuff, the mechanical like plot stuff behind the before life or whatever we call it.
The great before.
There you go. It feels very Good Place, you see, and it's a shame because if this came out before it, I would be like in a similar way to Inside Out, where you're like, God, that's such a smart way of like imagining the brain and how the brain works. I'd be like, oh, that's such a smart way of imagining like conception and being born and souls. But because The Good Place exists and did that like bureaucratic imagining of what happens either before or after we die, don't do before, but they do after. It's the same. There's a very similar idea. It's just basically we've taken The Good Place but done it for before life instead of afterlife.
I can see what you mean, but I don't think The Good Place coloured my viewing of this film. It didn't come into my mind on either viewing.
Clearly you're not thinking deeply enough about it. You were given the not thinking deeply enough badge when you were being thrown into the pit to earth, and then they were like, you're not allowed to think deeply enough about this so that you can't work it. It's actually conspiracy. When you were born and you were like in the womb or whatever the process is here, that you become the soul. When do you become the soul?
I don't know. Do you just like drop in right as they're born?
Yeah.
But then...
Or is it conception? Or is it like you're soulless while in the womb? That's a conversation that a lot of people might get mad at.
Yeah, I think it must be conception, surely.
And that's when the soul is dropped in?
Yeah, because they're dropping in constantly and people are being conceived constantly, I imagine.
Okay, so what would happen if perhaps there was no one being conceived at the time at which you did your leap of faith?
But then the question is also, do they just inhabit humans?
Or is that like where Jesus came from? Because like that was the Immaculate Conception,
again,
of course.
A conversation that may upset a lot of people, so let's move on.
So someone just lunged off, and that's because no one was being conceived at that moment. You had an Immaculate Conception.
Perhaps, yes, that's an explanation for it, but moving swiftly on.
No, I'm going to linger here.
Soul had its debut at the London Film Festival in October 2020 and was set to be theatrically released in November, but was postponed due to the aforementioned COVID-19 pandemic. Disney decided that Soul would instead be released direct to streaming on Disney Plus on December 25th. It became the first feature-length film from Pixar not to be given a wide theatrical release. Now it has been released subsequently, but not in a formal fashion. And it's also the first to be billed as a Disney Plus original. Soul received widespread praise for its story, voice acting, and musical score.
Yeah, this is what we call the B+ tier to Pixar, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where it's not the best of the best, but it's certainly better than the freaking, Braves. Brave is Disney. And the Onwards of the world.
Brave is not Disney.
Oh, no, Brave is Pixar, yeah. Brave.
But it was such a Disney film that
even in my brain, it's like, that's a Disney film. What am I doing?
The interesting thing is, well, I think if Inside Out didn't exist, this could be pushed into the top tier.
Yeah, because like it's Pete Docter's less good film about blue characters who live in a spectral space.
Yeah. So
you should make a Smurfs movie.
He should. He's good at blue characters.
He does enjoy blue.
Moving forward here to the animation Gar, Pixar had to be mindful of the history of racist imagery in animation and set out to create characters who were recognisably black while avoiding stereotypes in old cartoons. They sought to capture the fine details of these black characters, including textures of hair and the way lighting plays on various tones of black skin. And I do think that was successful.
Yeah.
These characters are recognisably black, but they have their own personality. They're not just archetypes or caricatures.
It's nice that we can just not be racist about it anymore. It's like, it's weird that even in 2020, they're like, we have to think about how not to be racist about this. Like, they don't think about that when doing white characters.
No.
They're not like, we can't be caricatures of white people. It's just like, they still have to think, how can we not be racist, guys? Let's not be racist here.
Yeah, but in fairness, it's the minimum they could do. But, it's refreshing to see those kind of characters portrayed on screen in a more authentic way.
And, like, there's not a ton of black characters in Pixar history, so it's quite nice to have a movie entirely based around black characters.
The overall movement in Soul, to me, seems noticeably more fluid than other Pixar films.
This
Did
film
you pick that up?
is so nice to look at. This film is their best looking movie.
But just the way the characters move, but even their expressions, the simulation of the way they play the instruments, especially the piano, it's just uncanny.
Like, there's just, the first scene in this movie is just sitting in a school. Joe teaching his band class. And just look at the lighting in that scene, and you'll be like, oh geez, they've come so far. Just the lighting of that dingy classroom is like leaps and bounds better than even movies we were watching 5 years ago. Even like The Good Dinosaur, which I think is its biggest strength, is that it's very pretty. This film is so much like more detailed and better to look at. It's just like they've come so far with these movies now, and it's very fun that they have like the two sides of Pixar. They have like the cartoony side for the before life, and they have the realistic side for Earth. And it's like you see both of the strengths of Pixar. It's like the bright colors, the imagination for the blue people, Smurfs, and the
Souls.
the actual like gritty, down to earth realism of New York City. It's so pretty. It's insanely pretty.
New York looks magnificent in this movie, to your point, Gar. You could almost mistake it for video footage at times.
It probably just looks better than the video footage. That's the problem.
Yeah, New York doesn't look that nice in real life, actually.
No.
Maybe in summer, perhaps. But everything from the movement to the instruments to the expressions to the environments. Like, I think you raise a good point there. The two worlds feel so distinct because they're so different from each other. We have the ethereal, fuzzy kind of conceptual space of the great before and whatever we see of the great beyond, and the gritty realistic Earth or New York. I'm going to go, it's not even going out on a limb here, guy. I think this is their best looking movie.
Yeah, far and away. And like we were commenting when we were watching Coco about how like, oh look, they actually animated someone playing an instrument. And it was a very showy part of that movie. It's like, look, we're going to close in on his fingers as he plays the guitar. Whereas here, there's a bunch of people that play instruments and it's just part of the movie. You know, it's just like, this is just the thing we do now. It's just a detail of the animation that we can like render in such excruciating detail that you see each key move as he plays the piano, and you see his fingers move as he plays the piano. Because again, no one on Earth would care if they shot him playing the piano from an angle where you couldn't see his fingers and couldn't see the keys move. No one on Earth would care. No one would be like, oh, terrible movie, I hate it. Why did they do that? I wanted to see his fingers move on the keyboard. But no, they're just like, yeah, you know, tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. We can animate that now, and it looks very good.
Yeah, and then you see characters playing the saxophone, and then the light reflects off the saxophone like in real life. It's a very detailed movie, and I think, you know, the way they have improved to, in any character, reflect light on skin, it's just, it brings them to life more. This has the most life of any Pixar movie.
Yeah, and it doesn't even feel like they're flexing anymore. As I said, that Coco scene feels like they're flexing. It's like, look what our animation can do. Like we mentioned, I think, Monsters University, there's a scene where they're like, they just randomly show a puddle and you see reflections in the puddle, and they're like, look, we're just flexing our animation here. And I think this is just the end game of that, of like, this is just what we can do now.
This is BAU, business as usual.
We're not even showing off here. This is just what we can do now.
I do want to touch on it, Gar. I do love the art style of The Great Before. I know it's reminiscent of Inside Out, but it's so experimental and abstract, you know. It's like watching one of those Calm or Headspace videos or something. It's just really interesting to look at, and I like the way they represented the Terrys and the Jerrys and the souls. Apparently they were based on conceptions of souls from different religions. You could take or leave them. They're blobs, basically, but...
Yeah, just like they were blobs in Inside Out. They basically just taken the same idea and made them more caricature-y and more blobbish.
Which makes sense because they're not defined yet.
Yeah, and that's part of the idea, that these are just empty blobs that need to be filled up with creativity and spark. And they go to Earth and they become proper physical beings.
But I do love the look of the Terrys and the Jerrys, like almost like a Picasso drawing or something.
Yeah, just all the bureaucracy of it is very abstract looking and very strange and they're like flat 2D, all of them as well. Yeah. Which is an interesting thing. Everything else is 3D, but they're like these line drawings effectively.
Yeah, it's weird and funny to see these ethereal beings be so bureaucracy driven.
Who are they?
I don't know.
This is what I want to get into. Like, who dictates this? Is there some kind of set of rules?
Is it the G-Man?
It's the freaking, you know, what comes out. You're like, oh, well, the Big Bang started. It's like, who created the Big Bang? It's like, well, this did, and what came before that? So that you have the same question here about Soul. It's like, well, who created this bureaucracy? Who runs it? Where did it come from? Where did the rules come from?
That's rich mining material for the sequel here.
Who created this giant room of souls where you just have a filing cabinet of everybody's soul?
Moving on here now to the story, Gar. The filmmakers initially experimented with the lead character as a scientist because they wanted a profession that would be more appealing to the audience. Docter decided that a scientist was not naturally pure enough, so they arrived at a jazz musician. Once it was decided that the lead character would be a jazz musician, they chose to make the character African American due to the group's large role in the development of jazz history.
I like the way they're sitting there being like, alright, we need the character to be appealing. Scientist, which is like a difficult to comprehend based on like the fact that the amount people deny science is because science is hard to understand.
Yeah, it's quite divisive these days.
It's not I hate that word. It's not divisive. People are just stupid and wrong. Because divisive is kind of the thing people use. It's like, oh, the film was divisive. It's no, just lots of people thought it was bad and fanboys thought it was good. That's what people meant when they say a film is divisive. Science is not divisive. Science is science. And people are stupid. But like the reason people are stupid about science is because science is like very impenetrable to people who aren't smart, including myself. I'm not dunking on people. I'm not smart. I don't understand most science. That's the reason people are like, oh, I'll take the easy explanation. So I do find it amusing that they're like, we need a very relatable, understandable profession for this. Scientist?
Yeah. So you can see why they shelved that.
Also, yeah, what would he be freaking sparking joy for? It's like, I'm chasing a cure for something?
I want to be recognised in some way, I guess. Or...
For my science? It's much easier to be like, I'm a struggling jazz musician. That's a much more relatable character trait.
Yeah, because we're all chasing dreams that we may or may not accomplish.
Like our podcasting dreams.
Indeed.
So you can tell all your friends that these two guys are sitting there without their soul fulfillment. They want to go to the magic soul land where they ascend to a higher plane due to how committed and into their art they are. And we can't get there until we have 17 million listeners. 17 million, guys.
That's the number.
So you have to go out and you get a 17 million listeners so we can have that kind of fulfillment, so we can meet Graham Norton on his pirate ship.
Indeed. It's still mad to me that he's in this movie. It's like, because he's quite a famous celebrity over this side of the world in Britain and Ireland. He's from Ireland, in fact, where we're from, in Cork. But it's just, I think it's one of those things where because of COVID, I've heard this a few times, because things were filming and then people who were slated for movies couldn't come over and things like that, they cast someone else. But then the fact that this is an interesting movie because Pixar mostly produced Soul from home. They didn't work in the studio for this one, so they could get people that were further afield, I guess.
It's kind of insane to think they made this film from home.
Yeah.
They made this film, like, everyone understands how difficult it is to do anything from home now. Like, everything just has that extra layer of friction, an extra layer of difficulty. And to think they made their best looking film just from home. It's like, turn it out.
I don't think it was entirely from home, but it was definitely finished, and Luca, which we will talk about next week, was made entirely from home. But, Pixar created an internal culture trust composed of Black Pixar employees and hired several consultants, among whom were musicians Herbie Hancock, Terry Lynn Carrington, Quincy Jones, and John Baptiste, who co-wrote the score, educator Jonetta Cole, and stars Questlove and Davida Diggs. The filmmakers worked closely with them throughout the film's development, and again, this is a minimum you can do, but at least it's made and directed by people who have that lived experience.
Don't be racist, don't be racist, don't be racist, don't be racist.
I can imagine them in the dailies, like showing their stuff as like, show of hands, is this racist? No? Okay, carry on.
By the way, the Wikipedia page. This film wasn't directed by Pete Docter.
Was it not?
It was co-directed by Pete Docter.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Ken Powers was a co-director on the movie. Look at the credits. He only gets a writing credit here on the Wikipedia, people. Fix that. Wikipedia is racist.
They have contempt for him. That didn't really work, sorry. Contempt? No, okay.
No, there's no pun there, Ken.
No
matter how good the name Kemp is.
I wasn't sure what the middle part of this movie would be going in, having seen the start, but...
That's generally how films work. You're like, where's this going?
Yeah, but like, I didn't know whether they'd stay in the great before, like they would have Inside Out, or where they were going. But a comedy of errors where 22 as Joe and Joe as a cat was not what I predicted. The idea for the therapy cat and Joe landing inside its body came from Mike Jones, who was one of the co-writers. Doctors and Powers liked the idea as it offered a way for Joe to be able to look at his own life from a different perspective and appreciate it, which was an important piece of the story puzzle. I wanted to come to that. So, like, one of the more clever parts of the story is that Joe gets to see his life from a different perspective and see what it's like for someone else to walk in his shoes. So, generally, he's not appreciative of his life, or he's very singularly focused in terms of his jazz aspirations, that he doesn't realize that he has a very good life. And that's one of the themes of the movie, that while we should have a spark or a purpose, the joy in life is having lots of little purposes or enjoying the journey.
Could we say, he has a wonderful life? It's a Wonderful Life?
Yes.
Because it's the thing from It's a Wonderful Life, except he didn't. Actually, no, he did die. So yeah, it's exactly like It's a Wonderful Life, except somebody came back as him, and 22 is a better him than he was. And he's like, God damn it. Yeah. Which I think is part of the reason he lashes out at 22.
One of the things that strikes me, like 22 says to the barber, is like, oh, why didn't you tell me this stuff before? Like, he never asked. All he would talk about is jazz. And then he assumed that he liked talking about jazz, and he didn't.
And everyone's like, shut the fuck up about jazz, dude. I get it. You play the piano. You're pretty good at it. But it's all you talk about. It's really annoying.
But the whole thing of 22 finding her purpose through walking in his shoes and him finding an appreciation for his life, having seen that, I think that's very well done.
What do you think about the third act tension, Ken?
Where she runs away? Yeah.
It's not as bad as Onward.
It's not.
But it just feels like we need third act tension. Engage.
Exactly. I did feel a sense of whiplash where I was like, where's this coming from? You know?
Yeah, it's just like, it's the exact same thing they did in Onward. Where it's like, we're getting along, we're happy, we're living life. Just throwing a grenade in there. Does it feel entirely earned again? Not really, but they need it for the third act, so there we go.
At the same time, it's not as bad as Onward in the sense that you do see hints of it throughout, where the penny is starting to drop for 22, so I don't think it's as egregious as other examples.
I think it's still a little like, we just need these characters to go somewhere, so we're going to make them go somewhere, even if it doesn't entirely work. But I don't think the place they get in the end is as good as Onward, but the rest of the film is better than the rest of Onward, so this is a real juggling act there.
It's like the exact opposite, in fact, yeah.
It's like, most of the film is good, and then the end point is pretty good in this, but it doesn't get you the same way Onward does.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about the ending, Gar. I would describe it as a have your cake and eat it too ending.
Yeah, my take is he should have died.
Yeah, so filmmakers were undecided on the ending of the film before the final screening. Alternate versions of the ending had Joe passing on to the great beyond.
Better ending.
While others had him returning to Earth a year later.
Cowardly ending.
Or staying in the great before as a mentor.
Better ending.
Several brief scenes had 22's life on Earth after her birth, including one of her reuniting with Joe in New York. This was all storyboarded. These scenes were ultimately discarded in favour of leaving the audience decide for themselves. So essentially what we have here is the all dogs go to heaven ending.
Yeah.
And I think it's a bit of a cop-out.
Yeah. Like, I think he should have died.
Yeah, and like, it is tragic, but people are taken before their times, you know?
Yeah, and he helped someone else find their way, and that's, that's what we learn. That's part of what makes him him. Like, he's a teacher. The person who's getting him the gig in the club is like, oh, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you, you know?
And that kid who plays the trombone.
Yeah, is like finding her spark thanks to him, and he helps 22 find her spark. It's like, that's what he learns, and like, that's the reason I would have actually been more on board with we're keeping you here to help people find their spark. It's like, you're still dead because you died, you're dead, but you know, you have this new role in the before life which suits what the kind of experiences that you learn through this movie that are important to you. And I think it is quite the cop-out that he just comes back to life.
Yeah, I think it's a middle ground, what you just described there, which would have been more acceptable, but like, the film seems to be going in that direction because they have this montage of his life where he kind of says, look, I've had a good life, and he realizes that his overall purpose, as you said, was to help people find their spark. And, you know, all they had to do with stick the landing was to stick with the stakes.
Yeah.
And they completely, literally right at the last second, because the movie ends directly after this, we're giving you a second chance, and he just walks out his door and he's like, I'm going to live life to the full. And that's it.
Yep. He's happy out.
No.
They should have killed him, which would have been a nice ending, where he just closes his eyes and goes through the death gate and is dead. Then you can make a sequel about what the death gate looks like, the great beyond.
Yes.
The afterlife. Or, as I said, I would have accepted. I would have thought it would have been a nice ending to give him a role in the great beyond as one of the mentors.
Yeah, but again, that might have been a bit the good place-ish, because Tahani does do that as well.
Still
a good ending.
I still think that works, and it works for what the story they told in the movie about how he realizes that this is in fact his spark, not in the music, and it's not a singular thing. You're not just put on Earth to do one thing, and sometimes it can evolve, and sometimes music can be your thing, and sometimes you can realize something else can be your thing.
And one thing they kind of drop in there, they don't tease it out too much. They talk about how I referenced earlier, you know, life isn't about one purpose, it's about lots of little purposes, and sometimes we can actually become really concerned with like getting to a destination and forget about enjoying the actual journey. So they do that with the, you know, the lost souls and stuff. I do think it's interesting, but I don't think that was fully realized.
Yeah, and that's more just like, it's there for a little plot thing. so that 22 can become a lost soul at the end. It doesn't feel entirely like they're fleshing that part out of the movie other than for it to be a plot driving device at the end. It doesn't feel like they have much to say about it, because it would be more interesting to go deeper into like people who get obsessed with music, for example, because the example they use is a very low hanging fruit. It's like, oh, a hedge fund manager becomes obsessed with hedge funds and realizes that, oh, my life is going nowhere, what am I doing? Then he trashes his offices and probably goes to prison. But they don't really dive deeper into like that singular obsession with one thing that might be damaging, even if that one thing is your spark. Which I think is a more interesting like idea. Like the one thing that is your passion is the thing that drives you deeper into that kind of like pit of despair.
Yeah, again, it's really interesting, and I do touch on it, and in fairness, there is a good gag at the end where one of the Jerrys, played by Richard Ayoade, is like, you humans and your meanings of life, is like, which basically says it's not about one meaning.
Yeah.
Like, people just want to simplify everything to make them understand it, hence why people don't believe in science. But even though, actually, science explains things, so you think they'd be happy with that. But,
people are like, oh, no, science is wrong. The only way science has ever proven wrong is by more science.
I think we give ourselves anxiety, and, you know, it actually almost deepens the existential dread when you feel like you haven't found this big purpose or you're not working towards it. Whereas if you can maybe, and this is the essence of mindfulness, enjoy where you're at and the journey and the small things, your life can be good and you can have a purpose. It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah, sometimes your purpose can be recording a Disney podcast. Sometimes your purpose can be making dinner today.
Yeah, getting out of bed, that's good too.
Yeah, the small things, the small victories in life, the little joys. You don't need to be a world famous successful podcaster, even though 70 million, I already said it. We need 17 million.
Wrapping up the story here, Gar, I do think this is one of the strongest voice casts in a while.
Yeah, because like we kind of bumped on Onward, which had big names in it. It had Tom Holland and Chris Pratt. And like, this has a lot of big names in it. It has Jamie Foxx, it has Tina Fey, who are like two big names, but they're very good. And those characters feel like they couldn't be somebody else, in the same way we mentioned about like Tom Hanks and Tim Allen. Like, they feel like they bring something to the character that's not just their name. Particularly Tina Fey as 22, who I think is very, very good.
The weird thing about her is you hear Tina Fey, but you don't hear Tina Fey. You're buying her as the character, which is the complete difference from Onwards. And Jamie Foxx is excellent. A very good voice performance. Like, you can hear him. You know Jamie Foxx is there, but it is a proper performance.
Yeah, same with Graham Norton, to be fair. He's also very good in this movie.
Yeah, and Rachel House as Terry.
I don't like Terry.
I love Terry. I'm sorry. But I do love a New Zealand accent. So I think everything is funny in a New Zealand accent.
I'm one of those, like, Terry's the annoying bit of this. He's like the mater, or the, like, it's just, no. And, like, I think this film is slightly too long.
It's not that long, really, though.
It's 150, so it's probably like 142-ish, taking credits out. I think if you took the Terry stuff out, I think the film would run a little smoother. Because again, I think the film has all the dramatic stakes you need on the character level, that you don't actually need the threat chasing them, you know?
Yeah, but then there's the question of how to get them back to the great beyond to spur on the end of the movie.
They don't need it. They don't need the forced third act tension. They can just stay on Earth the entire time. And she can realize that she is like, well, I'm happy, and then she can go back. Graham Norton. How famous is Graham Norton in America? He's pretty famous.
Like, he tried to crack America at one stage. I remember seeing him in a couple of TV movies. Or like even movies that might have been released in the cinema. And it didn't really work out for him.
Well, like, his talk show is very big, particularly on YouTube.
And there's BBC America as well.
So, like, I wonder how many people watch this film from America and it's like, oh, it's Graham Norton. Like, we hear Graham Norton and it's Graham Norton, you know? You can't be like, that's, you know, anybody else. It's Graham Norton.
But as Irish people, he's one of our biggest exports.
But even in the UK, he's one of the biggest stars in the UK. He's one of the most well-known people in the UK. So anybody UK and Ireland hears Graham Norton's voice, it's Graham Norton, you know? As opposed to, like, I would be very interested to see how many people in America is like, who is this obscure voice actor here? Is it somebody I've never heard of? And they're like, no, it's Graham Norton.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know that as well, or how he came to get the role.
Because like, I think he's good in the movie. He's pretty good. But he is the Tom Holland, Chris Pratt effect where it's Graham Norton.
Yeah.
There's no mistaking it. It's Graham Norton. But yeah, I would be interested to see, like, Americans for whom Graham Norton is less famous. How many people would be like, oh, this is a really interesting voice performance, instead of it's Graham Norton.
But I do think he does a good job.
How many times can I say it's Graham Norton on a podcast?
Yeah, we'll put that in the tags so we get some SEO.
It's Graham Norton.
A big part of this movie, as we said, Gar, is the music and score. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross of Nine Inch Nails fame composed an ambient score for the scenes in The Great Before. They're most famous for The Social Network, of course. John Baptiste wrote a number of jazz scores for the New York segments of the movie. He wanted to create accessible, user-friendly jazz that would appeal to large audiences.
I think he succeeded. I think the jazz sections of the score are way better than the other sections of the score.
Yeah, the jazz music for me really captures the feeling of New York, but also the randomness and unpredictability of life. So jazz is known as an improvisational medium, and I think that really lended itself to this film.
Yeah, like jazz is a metaphor for how they should be living their life. They're jazzing. They use it as a verb multiple times in the movie. Incorrectly, of course, but that's part of the joke. Like, jazz is a stand-in for spontaneity. It's a stand-in for improvisation. It's not just, predictable, rote, by the numbers. It's meant to have soul. It's meant to go where you are not expected. It's meant for the musician to feel it and just go where it takes them. And that is, again, a very, very good stand-in for the broader themes of the movie, where it's like, it's very interesting to see Joe be obsessed with jazz, understand what jazz is, but then live his life in a way that is directly contradictory to the spirit of jazz. That's a fun contrast. And it takes 22 to point that out to him by just jazzing. By just jazzing the life.
Yeah, as you say, jazz is his life, but he's not learning the lessons of jazz. It's like really... But we all do that in life, where like we're living something and we don't get the point of it until someone gives us a different perspective on it,
Yeah, so I think that's the best probably use of music in Pixar movies. Because it works both on a score level, it's a very good score, and it works very, very well on a thematic level.
The score in The Great Before is the complete opposite. It's ethereal and otherworldly.
I think it kind of reminds me a lot of the Wall-E score.
Yeah. I do like it. I think it's great because it does create that contrast between the two worlds again. And it's very relaxing as well, which is a bonus.
Yeah. And it feels very Pixar as well, doesn't it?
It does.
It feels like the music, if you went into Pixar, wherever their office is in California, and you went into an elevator, it does feel like the music that would be playing in the elevator in that Pixar office.
I really hope they do have that in their offices. Like you're in the elevator and it plays Toy Story or something. Feels like they would do that. The legacy of Soul, Gar, we've touched on some of these points already.
It's far too young to have a real legacy, but sure.
True, but Soul is the first Pixar movie to feature a black lead character and primarily black cast, which is...
Thumbs up, do it more.
Do it more and do it for the right reasons. It's the first Pixar film to not receive a wide cinema release, so that's significant in itself. Soul made many top 10 film lists of 2020, including the National Board of Review.
To be fair, that's not very hard, Ken. There was like 10 films released in 2020.
Yeah. The American Film Institute also had it in its top 10.
Like, what are you going to do? Like, it won Best Animated Movie, didn't it?
It did.
And there was like 2 other films competing with it. It was the most by default category I've ever seen in my life.
As you said, Gar, Soul was nominated in 3 categories at the 93rd Academy Awards: Best Animated Feature, Best Score, and Best Sound.
Wait. There's no one on Wikipedia. Soul led the 93rd Academy Awards season with 3 nominations?
I don't know if that's true.
It had the most nominations? I wouldn't be surprised, because, again, 2020, there was like 10 movies released all year, so...
Yeah, they won for animated feature and score. This was the COVID Oscars, as you said. It may have been boosted by the slim pickings that year.
I assume The Father probably had nominations, right? I don't know.
I don't think that's true, Gar. I think maybe led in terms of having one of the higher nominations, but 3 isn't that many either, though.
No, I'm on the list now. Mank had 10, so never mind. Wikipedia is lying to me. How dare the crowd assembled information source lie to me?
In summary, I think Soul has soul in its music, in its visuals, in its characters. I think it has it in its story, but I think it draws unfavourable comparisons to other similar
Pete Docter directed movies.
Yeah, Inside Out does stick the landing more, and in fairness, I think the message does land on me and it does resonate with me, but...
Does a Trent resonate with you?
Good job, sure.
Reznor, get it.
But I don't think it got to the very soul of me. I'm using the word soul a lot.
Uh-huh.
I think at the end you're supposed to have that kind of thing. It's like, I'm going to live my life and all this. And I do get that from the film, but I don't think it landed as much as they would have liked.
I'll just lie in bed thinking about my purpose all night. It's fine. By the way, the films that beat for our best animated feature, Onward, didn't have a chance. Over the Moon, don't even know what that is. There's Wolfwalkers, which is an Irish film I haven't seen, but should have won, obviously, because it's an Irish movie.
Yeah, a lot of people wanted Wolfwalkers to win.
It had no hope against the Disney Plus released Pixar movie. Yeah. The most easily accessible Pixar movie ever made in this year in which no movies came out. It didn't have a chance. But the film that obviously should have won, Ken, that was nominated that year, a Shaun the Sheep movie, Farmageddon.
Of course.
How dare they rip Shaun the Sheep off.
I remember seeing that, and they do tend to nominate Ardmore quite a lot, but that was a bit egregious in fairness.
How dare you disrespect Shaun the Sheep like this? It should have won. I haven't seen it, but it should have won.
Sure. I find the TV show annoying.
Farmageddon. It's a good pun. Is it as annoying as Terry?
Terry is not annoying.
Terry's very annoying. Terry's meant to be annoying. If you don't think Terry's annoying, it's a bad character.
Well,
The movie's failed.
In fairness, I just find Terry funny because of the accent.
Got him. Oh yeah, this movie, it's a good movie. As I said, it's in the rare B+ tier Pixar, where it's very good. It's their best looking movie. It's very interesting thematically. I think just some plot stuff leads it down. There's just some of the plot contrivances. And I think, as I said, I think the movie's a little too long. But other than that, most of the movie's very good. Great music, great visuals, great themes, great animation. If it had a great plot, A tier Pixar. That's what drops it down into B+.
Gar, if nothing else, through this Pixar review, we have created the definitive Pixar tiers.
Yes, there's A tier, B tier, B+ tier, and Cars 3.
Yes.
those are the tiers of Pixar.
Cars 3 tier. All right, Pixar pals, our song is nearly at an end for another week. Resident Magic by Design singer Nicole is coming up in just a few moments with a jazz standard from Soul. But first, we need to come to terms with the fact that the podcast is nearly over.
Yes.
I'm not ready, Gar.
No. I'm going to leap into the Earth portal.
New episodes of Magic by Design land every Monday where all magical podcasts are downloaded. Stop by our website at magicbydesign.buzzsprout.com to find a full list of podcast platforms. We are literally everywhere. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, you name it, we're on it. We're also on YouTube. Gar's catching up there.
Yeah, what went up this week? Cars 3, I think, went up. Yeah.
Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. If social media is your thing, fulfill your destiny by following us on Facebook at facebook.com/magicbydesignpod, on Twitter at magicdesignpod, and on Insta at magicbydesignpod. If you're a fan of the show and feeling generous, why not give us a review on your podcast platform of choice? No reason to stop there though. Life is short, so make sure to share the podcast on your socials or even recommend the show to a fellow Disney fan.
Or 17 million of them.
Before it's too late.
Unless you have 17 million Twitter followers where you can do it at once.
Yeah, I mean, life is short, as I said. Do it before it's too late.
Yeah.
You'll regret it if you don't. Podcasting is our spark, and we need 5 stars to fulfill our purpose before we go to the great beyond.
Oh no. Is that happening soon?
Yeah, well, maybe we may not get there if we don't get 17 million 5-star reviews.
Yeah, it's a cop-out ending for us if we don't die, if that doesn't happen.
Join us next week as we reach the peak of our climb to the top of Pixar's current film mountain with a review of the studio's 24th and most recent feature, Luca.
Oh god, we're already caught up.
Yep.
But there's a new Disney film out, so we have Encanto to do after that too.
Yeah, it's been 6 months of Pixar, Gar.
God, that literally disappeared. It's just time. Done. Gone. Moved.
But until then, stay safe and remember, whatever you decide to do with your life, make sure to live every minute of it. Now then, Nicole is here to put a cherry on top of this week's episode with a cover of It's Alright, featured in Soul. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.
Say it's alright. Say it's alright. It's alright. Have a good time, 'cause it's alright. Oh, it's alright. Now listen to the beat. Kinda pat your feet. You've got soul, and everybody knows that it's alright. Oh, it's alright. yourself a chance. 'Cause you got soul.
Let me say it again.